Each Sunday night, I'd watch the practice with none of my friends. I'd turn the dial to ABC to see the creep of the week that Bobby Donald defends. But I'm out of practice.
With your hosts, Keith Varney.
Out of practice.
Hey, Muggeneck.
Way back in high school, most every night, my mom watched QVC, so I missed the practice. There was no TiVo, what could I do? Wait 15 years, get fat, then stream it on Hulu. Out of practice.
There's a moment every time that I wish we weren't doing a video podcast anymore. This was my moment.
Out of practice.
Keith is literally and figuratively tethered to the podcast.
Out of practice.
And welcome to the Out of Practice Podcast, a weekly podcast that talks all about David E. Kelley's award-winning series, The Practice. This week we are up to Season 5, Episode 11, entitled An Early Frost, and what we're experiencing is kind of a late hurricane, it feels like, outdoors. How's it going, Mike?
I love that. For the most part, even though we are separated by 2-ish hours or so, we get the same weather. It is, we are inundated here. This is the hardest rain we've had since we've been Pennsylvanians. And,
Oh, yeah.
Our electricity is not really up to the task, it seems. We're flickering quite a bit, so this should be interesting.
So anything could happen.
As is usually the case.
And by anything, I mean, like, we might just stop doing this.
Yeah, if you
very,
get 45
very
minutes
abruptly.
in. You know, what's funny is as Jen is catching up on like some past episodes, past like 5 or so, and there was a few episodes where we were putting them in the can real fast, and they weren't edited great. Like we were out of sync, and then I resynced us and like re-uploaded it, but then like the bumper was all effed up. You know,
None of this
really
I'm
improved.
clocking because I don't listen.
Yeah, I know. Just an apology for those catching up who've had to go through some trials and tribulations listening due to my sheer incompetence technically. So my apologies.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm sure it was fine. I mean, I know people are only here because of our professionalism
That's true.
and our absolute lack of mistakes and clean editing, transitions, et cetera, et cetera. So
I love
Yeah.
that we try to stay real time in our, well, I guess we have to, it's a podcast, but when I look back at the analytics, the bulk of the listeners are probably 8 to 10 weeks behind.
oh, yeah.
So it's funny.
At least, yeah, no. And of course, because we talk so much about what's going on in real life, you know, we're going through COVID in real time, going through the election in real time, and it's completely useless to anybody. Because like podcasting, of all things, is a very bad medium for doing like up-to-date stuff. Unless you're listening to like the Daily or a news podcast, which is tough because if you're on like 538 or whatever, 3 days after you drop the episode, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Whereas
Like all of the political hot takes are sort of already old once they hit the microphone.
yeah, no, for sure. And luckily we don't do any of that here and haven't had any complaints from our listeners about that.
Oh man, what was the other thing I wanted to tell you? I've already forgotten. It'll come up. I'm sure it'll come up.
All right. Well, I will take this moment. One of the
Are you homeless? I want for the audience wants to know. In my write up for
Yes.
YouTube last week, it ended with Keith is homeless? Question mark.
I am not homeless yet. We are still in the house holding pattern as we wait for the paperwork to get sorted out. And so this process, even my mortgage guy who I just talked to, and to try to figure out how to like keep our interest rate going past the blah 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 after like 3 extensions, he's like, "Wait, how long have we been working on this?" I'm like, we're old friends now. We started this whole process in like freaking August. It's insane.
What's that?
But we are still hoping.
Hold on. This just in. what
getting breaking
old
news?
people say
Mm.
anytime you use the phrase "my mortgage guy."
My mortgage, yeah. I know it is really actually, speaking of old people, there have been many things of late that have reminded me of my oldness and just really just settling into middle-agedom. Certainly anything related to a mortgage is that way. 40th birthday, obviously that way, but it really clocked in yesterday when I was going through all like the Black Friday deals or this, that, the other thing, and I got super jazzed about ordering a fancy power strip.
Oh yeah,
I'm like,
you know what?
that is
You
the
use those
oldest thing I've ever heard.
You use those shitty ones from CVS, and they're not power
Yeah.
strips. Those are
No,
power
it's not.
extensions. Yes, Keith, I have. Goodness
Oh, look
gracious,
at that.
what a good one.
Woo!
I just got one
and-
not long ago. It was like $140. You gotta.
Oh, I did not. This was like 25.
Oh no, yeah, that's not really. Well, I lost a television once. So you literally got a surge destroyed my television, and so
we heard
after that, I
about
was
it all on the podcast.
Were we doing the podcast then? Oh my
We
god,
sure
it's forever. I'll add to that. I got a time hop this Monday.
Mhm.
From 2013, so 7 years ago.
Okay.
And it's me in front of the Christmas tree with my nieces, who are babies at the time, which breaks my heart because they're not babies anymore.
Right.
But I am in such great shape. I'm clearly right after a run, skinny as hell, fit as a fiddle, and I was like, goddamn. Now, you keep telling yourself, I can get back there easy, but now I remember me and Jen went for a turkey trot on Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to our listeners last week.
Oh, yes. Fun.
And it was,
I've done a Philadelphia turkey trot, and it also was,
The only thing trotting was my stomach as it bobbled up and down.
Oh, well, for your birthday, those pictures of Titanic, when I saw, I was so...
You were emaciated.
I was underweight. I was like full on, like I had a disorder of some sort, and you could see like my spine. But yeah,
I'll never forget that because I remember you telling me I used to be a fat guy when I
Yeah.
first met you, and I was like, "What? That's impossible." But we both
You
have
believe
shown
it
that
now,
our-
don't you?
We both have shown, Keith, you and I both, that our skin is flexible.
Yes, we have shown range. I believe in acting it's called range.
Yes, that is true.
Yes, but the characters I can play include very skinny guys and very fat guys. Now I'm sort of like I think I've found my niche. I think I've found my track that I want to continue with. But I actually, speaking of acting, I should quickly say congratulations to my sister-in-law, who this week was nominated for a Grammy.
Woo!
For the cast album of Soft Power. So
Keith,
that's
we had
exciting.
discussed last week. I'm sure you haven't prepped it because I forgot until just this second. We were going to do more TV Christmas edition.
Oh, yeah. I didn't remember that because I didn't care.
Yeah. So, and I'm not even ready with graphics or anything. So I'm just going to say, you ready for it? Oh, you have it. Do I have I don't think I have it. No, I don't. I'm not prepared for it. Okay, don't worry about it then. I just want to mention a couple of. So Jen, CEO Jen, is a fanatic when it comes to the Christmas season, and so I've given her permission to Christmassy up the apartment, and we've started watching some Christmas specials. So what I've been watching in the Christmas universe is Netflix's Jingle Jangle musical. It's a holiday musical starring and singing Anika Nani Rose, Felicia Rashad, Forrest Whitaker in the lead role.
Forrest Whitaker, interesting.
In a compelling, very emotional performance.
Really?
I cannot remember who wrote the score. It's the cynical side of me says it's like a Greatest Showman ripoff score. It's really going for that specific vibe.
What's that, Pasek and Paul?
Yes, but they did not write this. But the music's okay. It's fun. I'll say this, it's not a Christmas movie in any way, shape, or form, other than they just like put it in the Christmas kind of season and give it all the Christmas trappings. There's no
Right.
reason for it to be a holiday musical, but I'll say this. It is well performed, it is heartfelt, it is incredibly inclusive. You know, that was sort of one of the points clearly in their production of this.
Right. All the Hallmark movies, like generic white person, straight as hell.
Yes,
Christmas,
this is
Christmas.
not to
Yeah.
that. This is the direct opposite sort of answer to that, but it doesn't feel stunty in that way. It doesn't feel like they're. I don't know how to say this without. I'm a white guy, right? So it doesn't feel like they're like it's inclusive, but it is.
Right. Well,
And
I think
it's
at
organic.
this point, outside of Hallmark, like only generic white people feels more like the stunt today.
Yeah. Well,
Because it like what town is that? Like what
So
world
anyway,
is that?
I highly recommend it if you're feeling you want something sort of like saccharine, but well performed. The performances are really special. Some of the character actresses are really. It's not perfect, but it's absolutely worth a watch. Juxtaposed with every Christmas season, we download the Friendly TV app, FRNDLY, and it's only shows you like family friendly and Christian leaning television
Right.
channels. So your Hallmark series, I don't even remember, Good Faith, I don't even remember. what they're called.
Something.
We get it
Touched
because
by an angel.
YouTube TV doesn't give you Hallmark,
Oh.
and Hallmark Now, the Hallmark app, doesn't give you the latest run 55 Hallmark movies for the season.
Oh boy, you got problems.
So for $4 a month for the 2 months, December and January, I let Jen subscribe to this thing. So we watched Hallmark's big inclusive new run movie, which features your general white guy, white girl. No, just kidding. Your general white guy lead. He's a handsome TV actor who's getting back together with the real estate agent who was also the girl next door, played by who's Hispanic in her background in the show. So that's inclusive. The brother,
Whoa.
his brother who comes home for Christmas dinner is married to a man and they are trying to adopt a baby. So that's inclusive. And in a new
Ooh.
outreach of inclusivity, the senior parents are having marital problems.
Oh my
So
god.
Hallmark's really now, does the plot tick through precisely as you think it does?
mhm.
Sure as hell does. But you know what? They're trying, I guess.
So
Then
many
Jen-
tokens, it might as well be a Chuck E. Cheese.
And then last night I couldn't do it. Jen was like, I'm going to watch the lesbian one. I was like, all right, let me know how that goes. So we were watching those. We have on our queue right now our favorites growing up, Home Alone, which is, Home Alone came out when we were that age. We were Kevin
Sure.
McAllister.
No, I saw it in the theaters. I remember it.
I saw it in theaters. I read the book. My dad, I love it. It has the whole soft spot for me, and Jen and I bond over it because my dad would watch that scene where Marv
Merv.
gets electrocuted. Merv. Everything that happened with those guys, with Pesci and with what's the guy? What's his name? What's the actor's name? He does the voice in Wonder Years. He's the other Sticky Bandit. Anyway,
Yeah.
my dad would howl like to the point of pissing his pants, and Jen says her dad would do the same thing, and so it's sort of this thing we bond over that. And my all-time favorite,
Daniel Stern.
and we haven't watched it yet, but I watch it. Everybody loves The Christmas Story, and take it or leave it. I never was. Maybe it was a little before my time. For me, it's National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. That's the one.
Sure.
That is my classic, and I could watch it. Chevy Chase is my father in that movie. Like, my dad was a little bit of a dichotomy. He was a good guy, bad guy, but good guy dad was Chevy Chase in that movie.
Interesting.
So it's a lot of different psychological levels for me. It's also just a hysterical movie. So that's what we've been watching. Oh, and Nailed It, of course. Nailed It Holiday Edition. Is always fun. So that's what
Always
we've
super
been
fun.
watching. Keith, anything? Have you guys hit the Christmas season yet, or are you too busy trying to buy a house?
Well, neither one of us are like super Christmas-y in that way. When we were able to visit our parents, her parents are like super Hallmark movie, and there's like 24/7 on starting in like Halloween. So they're watching all of it. We get enough of it. when we're visiting. You know, we get plenty. It is enjoyable. It's fun. But we have been watching and spend a lot of time pausing and discussing Murder on Middle Beach.
Me too.
Oh, yes.
She won't watch it, so I'm so glad. Can we talk about it for a second?
You sure?
Because I have a lot of thoughts.
I do too, and I don't want to get too spoilery with it because
give kind of an overview plot synopsis real quick.
Yeah, so it's basically
this moment, the next 2 to 5 minutes, probably more because Keith and I got to get into it, will count as this week's Back in Time True Crime. Because I got nothing for later. So let's count this as that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, Back in Time True Crime. I can't get to the piano right now.
Fine, fair.
Yeah, so it is a documentary directed and starring the son of a woman who was murdered in Connecticut and whose murder was 10 years ago, and it is still, as of where we are in the documentary, unsolved. And so he has been doing this documentary for 7, 8, 9 years, and he's trying to piece together what happened and who killed his mother. And where we are in the process now, he has interviewed all of his family members, and there's all these crazy things going on. And every time the story unravels a little bit further, you're like, I could genuinely believe literally anybody in this guy's entire life could have killed his mother. And it is so fascinating as we watch this sort of beautiful Connecticut family seeming slowly unravel and unravel and unravel to the point where, like, wow, everybody here is so fucked up. I believe they could legitimately have killed this woman. And it's really fascinating. We've learned a lot about gifting tables and
which I'd never heard of before.
No, neither had I.
So
it's a pyramid scheme.
Yeah. So basically, each episode sort of centers around one potential suspect or group of suspects. Right. And I'll tell you what the achievement 3 episodes in, there's only one more. I love short form documentary, like these documentary series like The Vow, which was 9 hours, too long. Like,
right.
What I think is the achievement so far is within the first 45 minutes, I got worried because I was really invested in the mystery. But anytime the documentarian is also the subject/star, it can get, especially when this kid clearly had a lot of issues growing up and he's dealing with a lot. It can become the fear is that it will become very inundated about the meanness of it.
Right. Very navel gazing.
Yes. And it somehow it is a little that way in the beginning, but it absolutely.
Part of it is necessarily so.
Yes. Right. But the fear is that it's going to become about that. And it's not, because he clearly loves his family, even the people, his aunts who are under suspicion, his sister who's under suspicion. And none of this is by the police. This is all his father, everybody really. And he doesn't really have any of his own suspicions. He's literally on an answer finding quest. And that allows it to not become too influenced by his own investigation. He's just laying out facts. He's hired a private investigator who's kind of along the journey with him. And the mystery is really awesome. But what I love about it is what Keith said. Every one of us, look into your family. From the outside, there are probably plenty of people who are like, "Oh, what a great family! We love the Varneys, we love the Indeglios. They're the perfect example of a perfect family."
Right.
And as we all know, we're all the stars of our own documentary. Everybody's family's a little effed up, and this one's more than a little effed up. No one's been brutally murdered, but I guess where we're going with this is that it's a great documentary. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. And I will say only one more thing about it, and that is sort of every episode is kind of, it's not quite accusing another person, but like, let's explore if this person killed it, and let's explore if this person killed her. And all but one of those people didn't do it. But there's an HBO documentary with at least 25 minutes like, was it the sister? Was it the aunt? was it the father? And I'm like, if I didn't do it, I'd be pretty pissed about the sort of tone of which it's subtle. Like he is really fair with everybody, but there is a little bit of a, well, is it this person? And it.
Well, and like Keith said, every time they do that, you're like, yep, that's the person. That's the one. Like,
yeah.
And it's not even sensationalize it. Like these people have had some life journeys.
Yeah.
And
it's
bonkers, man. I feel bad for all of them.
I mean, it's a little spoilery, but like one of them admits to trying to hire a hitman to kill that woman. And she's not necessarily the person we think did it.
Yeah, because you get into drugs and alcohol and what you do when you're effed up and 25 years old. It's a triumph in a lot of ways. Last bit, this has nothing to do with Christmas. We've gone off.
Ho ho ho.
But recommended to me after that on HBO Max as well is the DB Cooper documentary.
Oh yeah,
it's great, Keith. It's great.
Is it? Okay.
If you have even a passing interest in the DB Cooper, and who doesn't? If you don't know that's the guy who I think it was the 70s.
60s.
It was when 60s, 70s, yeah, 60s. Hijacked a plane, asked for $200,000, got the $200,000. He also asked for a parachute. He jumped out of the plane, and nobody ever saw him afterwards. Totally disappeared. And
got away with it.
Investigates 4 potential people who might be DB Cooper and who there's a lot of evidence suggesting they were DB Cooper, and we go from there. So that's a great documentary as well. So, Merry Christmas.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. We talked about that lady who got murdered more than we talked about Christmas.
Jingle jangle, everybody. Felicia Rashad, Forrest Whitaker. All right, so...
Oh, my God. Yes, it is time to move forward and talk actually into our show at all, 22 minutes in.
Yep.
Yeah, let's get it done quickly today, huh, Mike? Let's hear about it in a segment we call...
Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas.
Now, this one, I feel like you should pull it up and read all of our comments from our dear friend Phoenix, of course, who has decided. Oh, I hear myself. Who has decided to just go after the Sportsball segment in a very profound and hilarious way.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Let me see if I can pull them all up here. Okay, so there's quite a few. We really, he and I really have developed quite a pen palship through our YouTube channel.
In an accidentally antagonistic relationship with me, which is my favorite part.
So he on our Season 5, Episode 10, Friends and Ex-Lovers, Phoenix starts off by saying, and this is the turning point when the podcast became watching Mike play PlayStation 5 whilst half listening to an episode of The Practice.
Which was amazing because you were just playing last week. That's exactly what was happening, but you were just playing it in your head because it was sitting in a box next to you. It's like me sitting here staring at the power supply. I'm about to unplug everything and try out. I'm doing a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, I can plug this one and that one. It'll be so
I was
exciting.
sitting amongst the boxes. So Phoenix goes, but you know what? Still better than a segment on 20-year-old sports. Then he goes on to comment on his own post and says, Mike opens the chicken wire that just arrived. Also better than a segment about 20-year-old sports. Finally, I respond and going, like and subscribe, LOL. I love my PS5, like a puppy. And he responds, hey, Mike, what games did you get? And then we go off on a PS5 tangent for a bit. And then he responds again. Mike listens to the episode while he gets up to go pee, but forgets to mute his mic. Still, better segment than 20-year-old sports. To which I reply, you know what? I'm an old man. And he goes, it's okay. I'm also an old man. Meanwhile, Keith is the oldest man. So
I clearly am, but I'm in for, he says, I'm only about 3 months away from being an old man. Are we going to have another big 40 coming up?
Could
be.
He is one of our most, he is our unofficial moderator.
There's a lot of, he's moderating himself. Yeah. No, I have given a lot of thought to this, and while I was walking around trying to figure out how I could amp up Sportsball this week, because Phoenix, you should know. You should
He
know
knows.
the more you poke it, the bigger it gets, which got way dirtier than I intended to sound.
Until you turn 40, in which case, no matter how much poking, there's very little movement.
The more you poke it, the more tired your finger gets.
Yeah, and it just moves side to side. Like a dead caterpillar that you're trying to see if it's still with you.
Oh, gross. Anyway, yeah. So, and we also heard from a new friend on Instagram, but she did not post it publicly, so I'm going to keep it between us. But it was a new friend who became a lawyer because she watched the practice.
I didn't
Which is not
see
the
that.
first person we've heard. Well, it's none of your business.
Was it a private message?
It was a private message to Oops,
Oh.
but I think because I read it, you didn't see the notification.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so it is not the first person who has reached out saying that they either went into the law or considered going into the law because of the practice.
Okay.
So there it is. All right, let us move forward in our show and hop into the time machine, into the date of, I can't find it. There it is.
January 7th.
January 7th, the year 2001. We are now into 2001 in January. It's crazy. We skipped the whole Christmas season, and now we're into the new year. And we all want to know what was going on.
This day in the basement.
Oh!
That's the wrong. Whoa, it's both segments at once. You want to just here we
Let's
go.
get through it.
It's time for the Out of Practice Podcast's This Day.
Yeah, well, this was a cool. This was the last Christmas I spent, or the only Christmas I guess I spent with my girlfriend at the time. We break up in the next month or two. But Keith, I prepared a photo for this because
Oh, nice.
the Christmas season I remember with her, and after that, January 7th, the whole month of January. In fact, for the next few months, this is serious now. I have mentioned it before that I have a lot of trouble kind of piecing this period of time together. Now, 2001, things get a little clearer because I have some pictures and some things happen. But this from January until about April, this is the experience I'm having. I cannot. It's not just like it's a weird phenomena because I know what the feeling is of like having limited memories or things are fuzzy, but this is a period of time that is just a void, like sheer, and I'm sure that it is a good deal of repression, I guess.
Well, you were going through some pretty serious trauma at the time.
Some trauma and like sheer denial and not the denial in where you don't believe something's happening. I think I don't know what the word is for when you just don't want something to happen as much or you're trying to avoid it so much that you just kind of dissociate. And a lot of that was taking place. I think I was maybe taking a computer class in Westchester. I was definitely hanging out with this girl a lot, which I think probably was a problem. I think she was like my guess is I was very obsessive and like, all-consuming. I think it was just a lot to handle, a lot of grief. Anyway, so I know the holiday season was a little rough, and yeah. Anyway, so bear with me for the next few weeks until we get to where I start remembering stuff. But that's January for me. Just leaves of memory blowing on a head. This was I don't know what that is. Is that a tree? Yeah,
The tree. Yeah, that's a cool image, and I think it really does like encapsulate that feeling because I have periods in my life that are very similar, and it is very interesting to see how you just like decided not to record that period, and it's understandable.
You know what? One thing I will say, and maybe I hope that it's pervasive through our entire society. I think it's at least moving in that direction. Is that back then, I remember at least feeling like I couldn't talk to anybody about this stuff. Like nope, and I was kind of I should say my family. It was mostly my family. If I'm being 100%, sort of were not available emotionally. They're going through their own shit, but it always felt, this grief and this trauma felt like a lot, like it had to be kept inside. It was a big secret because I wasn't functioning well in my day to day. I was a screw up. At least that was the feeling. I don't know, I'm sure that I don't know how to put it, but
You were a kid doing the best you could through a really awful time. Like, I don't think that makes you a screw up. I think it makes you a kid going through a bad time.
I agree with you. But I agree with, like, right now, that's an acceptable, we can have that conversation and people can give you that grace. I think it was less so even 20 years ago. And I'm glad that there's been some progress. Or maybe it's just I've been able to accept that wasn't the case. Maybe people weren't viewing me that way.
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because like the world in general is much more accepting of mental health and trauma and caring about stuff like that. But that doesn't always apply directly to your immediate family.
Right. Yeah.
And I think within trauma, at least I found it to be true that what is often worse than the actual trauma is the lack of support around it.
Yeah.
And it's like we are very, especially with kids, but even young adults, that we're very resilient. We can get through a lot of things, but if we don't get the help and support and resources to work through what's happening, that's when it becomes really sort of cancerous and very and much more damaging. And I know, that I certainly within my own family, I have a lot of stuff like that where it's if I'd gotten the support I needed in the moment, the things that still haunt me probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, like I'm more haunted by the lack of support than I am by the things themselves. And so I certainly I never went through the experience you went through then, but I certainly understand that feeling.
What and it was a waiting game at this point. That was the thing. It's like my dad doesn't actually die until May. And so in January, when you knew it was kind of going in a direction, but it just wasn't, it was tough. Anyway, we'll get more into that, so stay tuned for that.
Well, we have some to look forward to for the season finale.
What about
Jesus.
What about how did you spend New Year's in January 2001, getting out of the year Y2K?
Well, it was not nearly so traumatic, although there are two things. One, I think I got this wrong last year. I think I might have screwed up my years, but I, throughout this holiday season, continued my tradition of the Christmas cop-out CDs. And so, as if you had not heard me talk about it before, why are you skipping episodes? But every year for many years, instead of actually having thoughtful gifts for my friends and family, I chose the lazy narcissistic gift of giving them a CD of my shit, of what I was recording. And I would do this with my two brothers. And this year was Christmas Cop Out 3, which was actually technically the fourth year I did it. But this is the third official one. And what I found traumatic this week was digging through it, trying to find something I wasn't horribly embarrassed to play from Christmas Cop Out 3. And I have to tell you, and this is probably time for me to talk to my therapist about it, but the visceral anxiety and shame I felt going through these tracks it's so intense and so wildly unnecessary. But this is the first one where I put a lot of my own music on it. And so there's a whole bunch of tracks from the first musical I wrote, which I started writing in college. So
not the one you wrote with your friend. That was just a song. That was in high school.
What's that?
There was one you had played for us that you'd written with a female friend of yours. That's different.
Yes. Well, that was the musical. That's true. I guess technically that would be the first musical I wrote on in high school with my friends. But this was the first musical I wrote by myself. And it was an original story, original everything. And It is terrible. It is real bad. So bad, so I am embarrassed to even say the title of the musical.
Okay, what about a plot synopsis?
What's that?
What about a plot synopsis, maybe? Quick overview.
Yeah, okay. Well, this was actually a period in my life where I was going through, I know I've mentioned it before, but all of these bad experiences with religious people and how I was treated as a non-religious person in a world in which the people were very, very religious. And so this musical ended up being sort of like a primal, angry scream reaction to that feeling. It was bad. It was real bad. But anyway, so it's about the son of a televangelist who like tries to escape his family.
Wow.
And but his family's like chasing him around, and that sounds much more interesting than it was. It was so bad. But unfortunately, most of that score was documented on this album. And I'm not going to play any of it for you, but I will put a little track
space in the way like
of
a window,
I did
but to
some
see
Stephen Sondheim.
I was going to say, that's very
the
Sondheim.
only way to see.
That-
One of my favorite songs.
Sunday in the
When
Park?
the woman that you wanted goes, well, you say to yourself, well, I give what I give. But the woman who won't wait for you knows that however you live,
That's a great role for you.
part of always standing by.
Oh, it's
like a
this is
dream.
finishing the hat from Sunday in the Park with George, and George in Sunday in the Park is definitely one of my like top 3 roles I would love to play in my life. And of course,
I'd
at
love
that
to see you
point,
play it.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah,
I really
well.
liked it, but I didn't understand it. But now I actually understand that role.
That's sort of beautiful. What's beautiful about Sondheim in general, I think. Let's not go down this rabbit hole, but you age into Sondheim. Like you can love and
Yeah.
respect and admire everything. Like from, and you always, it's funny, I always used to love Jack, right? And now you're like, oh, the Bakers, that's the one, right?
Right,
Or all of
right.
it. You just age into it. It's pretty awesome.
No, and you understand it in different ways. And I think that's it is sort of like unpeeling an onion. So that when I was 13 and listening to this album over and over and over again, I got parts of it. I really did. And it sort of drew me into the life of an artist. And it drew me into that. I became interested in that. But his thoughts on the creation process of art and what that feels like and how isolating that can be and how that affects relationships, like, now I'm like, oh God, this is literally how I feel a lot as I, look out the window at life going by as I record a stupid podcast.
You know what I do when I get really depressed? Like one of my things, and Sunday always reminds me of this, is I'll go to a Staples or like a really cool papery in the mall or something, and I'll just buy a blank journal because something about having blank pages represents possibility and represents
White.
Yep.
An open canvas.
It's just so. Anyway, here we go. So this is a podcast about the practice, and we're getting back to it.
What is it about?
But what was happening first? Let's find out. Let's hear a little bit from Eric William Morris.
Yes, indeed.
It's time for the Out of Practice Podcast's This Day in the World. The greatest hits, the biggest movies, headlines from Vermont, essential sports updates, and for some inexplicable reason, the weather from 20 years ago. Now back to Keith and Mike.
I think this is when we realized we should talk more, not on the podcast. All right, so the #1 hit continued. Even after the skip of December to be Independent Woman by Destiny's Child. The local paper, once again, I forgot to look up. So something happened in January in Vermont. I bet it was snowing.
So wait, but in the worldwide, like we were still the end of the Clinton era, and we were about to move into
We were
Bush,
a
right?
couple weeks from W's inauguration. The top movie was Castaway. A very
Wilson!
A very rewatchable, enjoyable performance by Mr. Tom Hanks.
And remember the big like that was the first time that a movie had been basically unscored. Remember that? There was huge swaths of that movie that were unscored.
Oh yeah,
it was a big deal.
It was good. It was really cool, and like Tom Hanks's physical transformation I thought was very impressive there.
No, never saw behind the scenes on that. I would be interested in how that whole process worked.
Well, he filmed the fat parts, and then like 6 months later, they filmed the skinny parts. This is actually a pretty good cover. Nicely done, Reenie Music. All right. You know what it's time for? Phoenix's favorite segment. The greatest segment in the world.
Oh, Sportsball, my thing disappeared.
Oh, no.
Oh,
This is horrible.
That's just depressing. But you know what? I'll put it on in post.
Okay.
It's time for Sportsball.
The New York Football Giants took down future head coach Tom Coughlin and the Jacksonville Jaguars 28-25 at Giants Stadium, locking in the division title and the number 1 seed in the NFC with a 12-4 final record. Kerry Collins threw for 321 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Philadelphia Football Eagles were only 1 game back, finishing with an 11-5 record, finishing with a 16-7 win over the Bengals. The Giants secured a first-round bye, while the Eagles were headed towards a wild card matchup with Sean King and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this has been Sportsball!
Well done. 2 things that stick out to me in Sportsball there. One, remember Kerry Collins?
Of course.
Out of Penn State, people thought he was going to be one of the greatest, and he had an okay career, but he never really reached the heights people expected from him.
Well, when he was he was drafted first overall by the Carolina Panthers, then had it all sort of blow up. His career sort of exploded. He had like a problem with a teammate and a racist comment or something like that. Got traded to New Orleans with Ricky Williams and Mike Ditka for half of a season before rebooting his career with the Giants. He was actually very good with the Giants. Like, he took us to the Super Bowl and had several good seasons. But yeah, Kerry Collins, interesting career.
More importantly, to kind of just highlight for you the shit show that is 2020. Back then, that wasn't 20 years ago. The Eagles didn't quite make it. They had to go through the wild card to get into the playoffs at 11-5. Eagles sit with quite a shittier record. What would be 3-7, 2-7, 3-7-1,
3-7-1.
And share first place with the New York Football Giants. in the NFC East.
You are half a game behind the New York Foot. We are 4-7. We are first place.
Wow.
We have a chance to be the worst division winner in NFL history.
So there you have it. We'll see if Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles can do better this week. But nonetheless,
it is now time for
Weather.
no, it's not.
You know.
It's not time for that.
All right. If you're not going to do weather, you need a new segment.
I know.
Because I do sports ball. You have to do a segment here.
Well, we did Back in Time True Crime earlier, so
We did.
Counts. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We just need to do the show not on Mondays.
Oh, is that the problem?
No, we're going to get back in the swing.
But that's the last possible second. Like this gives you more time to do the weather.
I know. I spent that time shoving food and pie in my face.
That's true. Yeah, I made pie from scratch for the first time.
Nice.
And Jillian made an amazing tofurkey.
Ooh, tofurkey.
It was it was actually way better than you'd think. All right.
But that's not a high bar to clear.
God damn it! My life has value, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
It's time to talk about the damn episode.
Okay, we are finally 44 minutes into our conversation going to talk about the damn episode, and that is The Practice Season 5, Episode 11, entitled An Early Frost. This was written by series creator David E. Kelly and directed by a first-time director, not just with The Practice, but ever, with Christina Musri. This is the first time she's ever directed on television. She will direct several more episodes of The Practice, but that will be the only thing she ever directs.
I wonder if she got in and then was like, "This isn't for me," or if she was like a friend of somebody or something. There's a story.
She's a producer primarily, so she was a producer on The Practice and L.A. Law. But again, that was the only those were the only 2 credits that she had. So she was a high-powered producer on both of these shows, directed multiple episodes, but she chose to do other things.
I also find it interesting that this far into a fairly popular series, we haven't seen any of our cast, our main stars, associate producing or directing episodes. Usually you see that by this point.
Yeah, that is interesting. And certainly as a Star Trek nerd, you're seeing the cast constantly directing the episodes. Yeah, well, be very interesting to see whether that continues. But first, we must ask the eternal question.
What is that supposed to mean?
What's your problem?
Is this what happens to women when you insert your penis?
What?
Good.
What does Mike think's gonna happen?
You know, what if he would have drank the curdled milk? Then what would have happened?
Shocker, Bruce Davidson needs a defense attorney still. And even though Bobby and the team, the partners, voted that he shouldn't take the case, correct?
Yeah, Bobby has been outvoted.
I think he's going to do it anyway, Keith. I don't know how, but I think he's going to do it.
That's your big swing? Yeah,
no,
all
it's
right.
not my big swing.
Let's get the big swing. Let's do this.
We've also got the problem of the puppy in the drawer as the torment of Lindsay continues from Mr. Hinks. And I think it's going to be too much, Keith. I think it's too much. She's going to demand that Bobby help her. Bobby's going to be a little bit too consumed. And so, after building such a redemption arc, Helen Gamble is going to invite Mr. Hinks to a meeting to discuss some things over some lemonade. You'll notice some lemonade with some nice ice. And Keith, indirectly or directly, Helen Gamble is going to lead to her second murder. And it's Mr. Hinks.
Ooh, all right. The big swing is Helen kills Hinks.
Helen kills Hinks.
I mean, she's already threatened to do it. So it stands to reason. It's not an unreasonable swing there.
Somebody's going to kill Hinks. Hinks is going to die.
Hinks is going to die. Okay, that is a big swing. All right. There it is, folks. Now, it is time, if you are watching this on the YouTubes, to switch over to your podcasting service of choice. If you're just listening to us, don't do anything. Soon we're going to move on and talk about the episode.
There won't even be an ad to worry about. To be honest.
Nobody wants to advertise with us.
One person's talking to us on YouTube. No advertisers give a damn. This podcast was made for you, except it's 7 hours long. So, you know.
We have tens of listeners.
Here's the episode.
Sportsball! Sportsball! Sportsball!
So many questions, so many things to discuss. So let's go ahead and get back into it. That's me. Hey, what's up?
That is you.
I don't know why I've done that.
I mean, honestly,
hey,
it's all about you. But
Yeah.
I like, if I had a choice between which one of us to stare at, I'd stare at you as opposed to me.
let me say,
You're still wondering what's going on with the ice cubes.
Well, I am. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell happened at the end of that. The ice cube makes a lot more sense now. We find the head in the freezer, so.
Right. We are thinking Hinks's head. It's this way, yeah.
But
you
not
know
a lot
what?
of answers.
We have a lot of questions, but let's answer some questions for the audience in a segment we call...
Mike has 30 seconds to remember what just happened on the show.
Y'all, Hinks is dead, or he killed somebody again. Bobby finally defends Bruce Davidson, and after 20-some witnesses, psychologists, they finally say he was crazy. He's going for a 60-day observation, and I hope at least that gives us a couple episodes that he ain't fucking in. Lindsay gets tormented by Hinks the whole time after Hinks kills, over-smokes. He smokes the therapist and kills her with nicotine, comes to the hospital. Bobby gets a big-ass scary guy to go and kill him, and either is dead or killed him.
All right. Oh, I like what you did there. I saw that. All right. Well, we only have one more thing to do, and that is to throw some awards at our actors. Here we go in...
Ladies and gentlemen, the Out of Practice podcast, in unofficial, unsolicited, unfactual association with David E. Kelly Productions, proudly present...
Oopsie.
The Oopsies! Celebrating excellence in acting good, lawyering good, guesting good, and being Tom Brady. Not to mention, this is where we rate the episode and stuff. Now, here are your hosts, Keith and Mike.
What the hell are the Oopsies?
Well, they're a fake award show that we do at the end of every episode. But guess what? We have a surprise.
Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas. Filings and subpoenas.
I'm so confused.
I just got a text from my boss who was looking at what we're doing, not live, but looking at last
Thank
episode,
God.
and wants to know what program do you do the video layering in, the assembling in?
You mean post or in live?
But how that you layer the videos in under the PNG and all that kind of stuff.
OBS.
OBS. Great. All right. I just solved a question for my boss, and now we can talk about the.
I'm available for hire if he's interested in.
Yeah. Well, there it
any
is.
work.
Most valuable.
And in post, you do Premiere, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
So after 11 episodes and multiple friendships ruined or strained, a relationship, a new marriage, potentially his wife's life deprioritized, all in the pursuit of showing the world that Bruce Davidson deserves to be a free man.
No matter how many people he kills.
Believing so much that he's friend of ambiguous origin deserves to be heard and helped. Bobby Donnell finally reaches the acquittal. So he was found not guilty on every murder that he has been accused of because of Bobby Donnell. I don't know how we don't find Bobby. It's not best friend. It's not best non-asshole. It's most valuable lawyer. And I think it was Bobby.
Yeah. It's true. And I think
Richard
you're
Bay.
right. I know. And I honestly, in terms of the actual litigation that we saw, I think Bay did a better job. But the story needs this to continue for reasons. So, I think Bobby might be a horrible asshole in this episode. But yes, he is the most valuable lawyer. Coming up next, this will be an interesting one.
Already famous cause you've been on TV, getting a paycheck. Or the first entry on your IMDb. Way to go, but you're the best guest actor. You are the best guest actor. You are the best guest actor on the episode.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Mr. Hinks, always amazing. We touted his incredible facial acting, intimidation, creep factor. We've lauded him with oopsies in the past. Shout out to all of our guests, our extras, basically. Lindsay, Rebecca, the victim's family in the galley. They all a lot of great facial acting and extra acting, in all honesty, in this episode.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that finally, after generally getting cast aside by us, this is the first time that I think Bruce Davidson, real Bruce Davidson, actor Bruce Davidson, actually conceptualized and painted the entire picture of the fractured man. I think, for my 2 cents, his performance was more indicative of the character than the writing allowed it to be.
Yeah. He had to layer a lot on.
Because listen to all of the questions we've had. Was he really crazy? Was he crazy in the moment? Is this all bullshit? Is this a strategy? When did he go crazy? What have they been setting up for? Was he crazy from the beginning? Did he just become crazy in the moment? That was all so muddy. The clearest picture of where he was him. He is crazy. He was under a lot of stress, but he also felt remorse. It's a complicated picture, and the clearest vision of it we got was from Bruce Davidson, the actor, and I think that I would like to commend that with my OOPSY Award.
Yeah, and I think that's really fair, and especially because the crazy parts in the writing itself was a little clunky.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sort of like jokes and the shots and this like it was a little it felt a little forced crazy, and where it was most successful was when he was saying normal things in a crazy fashion. It's a tough call because this might be the swan song of both Michael Emerson and Bruce Davidson.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know at this point. But I do think, yes, it should go to... It's like one of your bumpers. Wait, it is like... Here it is. Wait.
That last one is so sad.
It is the saddest little shot fired. All right. Well, congratulations, Bruce Davidson, on your well-earned Best Guest Actor. Now it's time for...
You killed your podiatrist or blew the case, but you let a single tear run down your face. You're the best actor on the show.
It is not easy to start at 11 and stay at 11 for a whole episode. It's exhausting. It's probably way too much. But if you can do it and also hire a hitman, it's pretty impressive. And I think that there was a lot of great... This is actually very difficult because whilst Dylan was I think it's his episode.
Right.
And I think ultimately I'm leaning towards giving him the oopsie. I'll put you up for fodder for argument. Helen has some great scenes, and Lindsay has some wonderful scenes. Lindsay has an excellent scene with the therapist's mother in the ER, and then
her showdown with Hinks.
Yeah, every encounter with Hinks is really effective. And Kelly Williams is she's just fire every time she's given something to do. And she's been this whole arc. She's been able to play the fear, but also the proactive sort of, I'm not going to be treated this way.
Fear without victimhood.
Yes. And that's a really tricky plank to walk. And she's just been awesome. But
she's been forced to play the victim before. And this is like a good development, both for the writing of the show and her portrayal of it, to not be the victim here.
Jimmy Michael Badalucco, I thought was served some raw, I think that the writing was, speaking of clunky, I think specifically for Jimmy, he was kind of set up to fail as a character in this episode. Like, I don't understand. It just didn't feel right. It felt like, I don't know what we were supposed to feel, but he felt like he was, they wrote him into a corner, and I don't think Badalucco could really overcome that as much as he tried and was good. I really do think Bobby, we don't like, he was an asshole. I don't think they were trying to get away from it. But he truly believed in Bruce, and I thought Dylan played it well. Like I said, I think it's Dylan McDermott.
Well, it's interesting. I think I disagree with you on Michael. I agree with you that the setup was a little clunky, and he was given a couple of clunky things to do. But I actually thought he was brilliant on the stand and sort of being in a position where he had to do three things at once. One, he had to be on the stand as the character reliving a traumatic moment, defend himself from Bobby, and also play the betrayal, but hide it because he's on the stand. He can't really play the full amount of betrayal that he's feeling from the way Bobby is treating him. So he has to hide it and yet play it at the same time. I thought he did a really terrific job. So we're going to go splitsies. So half to Michael Badalucco and half to Dylan McDermott, which brings us to
the Tom Brady Award for being Tom Brady.
Right over here, you're going to see Tom Brady in Lindsay's desk drawer, which is pretty funny. You had to really like shrink Tommy down. Oh, and you did go with Lifeless Body, so congratulations on that.
No, I went with a bolder choice.
You said season of big swings, so you don't. You're not. This week,
season of cease and desist.
Well, this week, if we're gonna do it, then I guess we should do it. You know where I'm going with this.
I know exactly where you're gonna go with this.
All right.
Yes.
Well, then, does it need to be said? Yeah, I'll say it. Tom Brady's head in Mr. Hinks's freezer. Tom Brady is. You know what? I want to do it differently. I don't want it in Mr. Hinks's freezer. Keith, I want it in yours. Tom Brady in Keith's actual freezer. Tom Brady wins this week's award.
Okay, well, you're not going to finish this podcast till I'm in prison. Okay, congratulations, Tom Brady's head in my freezer. Tom Brady. Yikes. All right, we have only one more thing to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to announce how many spare tires this episode gets.
We've been lamenting the exhaustion, the Bruce Davidson exhaustion for weeks now. So you'd think that by the time we got to the climax, we'd be over it. And as of last week, I was over it. But something about this episode brought me back.
You're back under it.
And I have to say, I don't think this is going to be one of our longest episodes. I don't think we've ever had as much discussion during the episode as we did this week. Legitimate. It is legitimate. And in fact, for me, it's raised some really interesting questions about the justice system because the insanity thing is really kind of nuts. So as far as Bobby explains it, they were able to prove that he's been having mental problems from the beginning and that finally he snapped. And that because of that, he's not liable for the death of this man. You get 60 days evaluation, and if they decide he's not, he's not going to be a threat to society, he could be free. And at no point did they say he didn't kill this guy. In fact, on the stand, he's like, yeah, I was going to kill somebody. And I just find that, to really raise some interesting questions, big picture, is it actually looking for justice, or is it just looking to, I don't know how to even frame the question. It's just, this isn't an eye for an eye kind of system in any way. And nor is it like the guilty are found guilty. There's so much nuance and there's so much sort of arbitrary rules. And anyway, I think it's really interesting in that regard. I thought the performances were great, even though they were set up to be really challenging. Like Dylan had a tough road to hoe because he was, like I said, at 11, and he was more unhinged. He was as unhinged as Bruce Davidson. He was an asshole. I don't like the way he's even remotely handling the Lindsay situation, and he's found himself in some deep shit now.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good episode. I loved it, like it said, even for me, a couple itches were scratched that they let us know how actually big the case was. He had 7 witnesses. Bay had 14 witnesses. There were 21 psychologists called to the stand. So it was a big, they filled in a couple of the gaps. They set up some great arcs moving forward, even without Bruce, even without Hinks. There's some fissures in the office now. And clearly there's some aftermath that Bobby's going to have to face and clean up some questions. And I think it brought to close 2 really interesting chapters of the season. I'm going to give it 7.75 spare tires.
Yeah, well, like I always say, I think that's fair. I think your point about the insanity defenses and what that says about our legal system, there was something said in the episode that I think we probably talked over, but it was about how rare insanity defenses actually are and how rare within that rarity it is to actually succeed on an insanity defense. And I think on the practice, that's their go-to for almost every murder case. And I think that is a bit of a trope, a television trope, in which like they just sort of jump to that because it's fun to argue on TV, but I think it's very rare in real life. I mean, I may be wrong, but I get that impression. On the episode itself, I'm so torn. I've been torn a lot this season because there's some really cool things here being set up. The rift within the office, the Hinks issue. Bobby may or may not have hired a hitman to kill this guy. It was ambiguous. Like, what are the consequences coming from that? What are the consequences within their own marriage about how Bobby has handled this by ignoring it and then going way overboard? On the other hand, I feel like there's just been a lot of missed opportunities in a lot of these plot lines, and it just feels like it felt like a little rushed. It felt a little bit like David had a lot of really good ideas here, and we're starting the oopsies again.
Sorry about that.
Where David's got a lot of good ideas here, but none of them are quite executed in a satisfying way. It feels like everything is like almost there, but they forgot to think through this element of it, or
the turkey was just like a little undercooked. It was good.
A little, yeah. It was a little undercooked, and it was like a little overstuffed, but they didn't season the stuffing. So, and as a result, the reason I feel torn is because conceptually and on pieces of it, I think it's a very high rated episode, but the follow through is low. So it's not like I'm going to give it 7 tires, but that's not really reflective of how I feel about it. It's like 8 tires and 5 tires. And so it sort of ends there in a mediocre place, but I think it's the sum of its parts are different than that.
It's like you know what? That's a good point. It's like a Voltron, right? And each of the individual little lines are really cool and really intricate. But for some reason, when you assemble it, it's like leans to one side. It's not quite. It's not cohesive in a lot of ways.
Every ingredient is almost good.
Especially the closing. I thought they each gave a great closing, and they did that thing that you and I love is when they kind of bounce the closings back and forth. They did that sort of closing montage. I thought that was great. The big picture, I'll tell you what's a great example of exactly what you're saying, Keith, is we have this one character, Mr. Hinks, who is like this incredible villain that they build up. And then, and he's scary and he's intimidating and he's like, he can't be solved. He's this great Rubik's Cube. And then they kill him off camera.
Right. Exactly. They kill him off camera in an episode in which he has maybe 10 lines.
Correct. And on the flip of that, here's Bruce Davidson's character, who is sort of, we are not given any context to what his real motivation is from the beginning or even at the end, and yet they stretch it for 11 episodes. And he's found not guilty, and he goes to the asylum place for 60 days. It's like...
You have the interesting one rushed, and the boring one not rushed nearly enough.
Yeah, it's cotton candy, baby. It's good in that moment on your tongue, but then you're hungry 2 minutes later.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so as a result, this whole season has felt that way, where, the Mr. Hinks comes to town is, I think, like as I mentioned before, I gave it a 10. I think it might be the best episode of the whole series, but the season as a whole has some holes in it. And
this is where I want the podcast that we aren't, that is doing the investigative journalism of like what's happening behind the scenes. Is there some issues in production? Is David E. Kelley being stretched too thin?
Because he's writing 2 TV shows at once. I think this is like the final season of Ally McBeal, where you had Robert Downey Jr. on it, and then he got arrested for a drug thing, and they had to write him off, and he was rescuing the show. His dynamic with Ally McBeal was like literally rescuing the show, both in ratings and in quality, and then he disappeared. So it's possible that he was like, oh God, I've got to try to fix this other thing, and this again felt rushed.
So when we have David on to have an interview, if anybody knows David and wants to send him our way, we have lots of questions. I'm sure
when he
he'd
wants
love
to
talk
murder
about
us for when we pick apart literally every word he's ever written.
Look.
All right, so we have given some tires. We have talked for far too long. It is time for us all to move on with our day. But before you do, reach out to us. Tell us what you thought at outofpracticepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at outofpracticepodcast. You can find our blog, outofpracticepodcast.blogspot.com. Let us know what you thought and tell Apple what you thought by leaving us a rating
Instagram
and
is
review.
Definitely Out of Practice Podcast is Instagram.
Yeah. So don't do what we wrote on the screen. Do what we say. Anyway, the Out of Practice Podcast is brought to you by generous donations from Leanne Wrights, Cloud Lover 69, Jorge Navoa, Jennifer Masanova. Dad, make them give us money.
I love that that's wrong. That is the perfect synopsis of this show. But if you would like to support this show that has even their own information wrong, financially, you can do so.
Give us money for our incompetence.
The show notes, not a lot of people do it anyway. The show notes below will show you how to do that. Turns out that after all of these creative ways to say laser sounds, nobody has done it better than our own antagonist, Bruce Davidson. So I'm going to leave it to him going out this week, and we're going to play our laser sounds and then let Bruce say goodbye to the series this way.